Hello and welcome to this video. It is your host Weeb Union, and in this one we'll be covering the start of the Israeli invasion of Lebanon, the battle and war between Israel and Hezbollah. This video will cover three main topics. What is happening? How did Israel prepare for this ground invasion? And what is the Israeli objective of it? Because they are the ones who initiated. We have to take a look at what their objective is to see exactly what will happen as we go forward. So starting out, we see currently a lot of things happening. Last night, on the 30th of September, the Israelis launched a ground invasion of southern Lebanon. This is a different route than what they used during the 2006 war in Lebanon. The Israelis gathered a lot of troops along the border area here near the Golan Heights, after which, during the cover of the night, they started sending in special forces, as we see with this image here. Israelis sent a lot of soldiers across the border area to try and pick up some border positions, clearing the way for the armored vehicles and the main force of their army. They then provided with this footage here showing the preparation and entry of Israeli soldiers into the border area. A lot of equipment laid out on the ground, the Israeli soldiers picking it up, moving on, and then this is exactly where the footage comes from. And Israelis take advantage of the night because they have night vision gear. They have a lot of gear that helps them fight in the night that Hezbollah does not have. Initial reports suggests that the Israelis are only present in the town of Blida here right along the border area. Meanwhile, they are heavily bombarding these settlements, the settlement of Kunin, At-Tiri, and Bint Jebel. On top of that, the Israelis have been heavily bombarding southern Lebanon as a whole during the past few weeks. In turn, Hezbollah has only responded so far by bombarding some border areas of the Israeli army here in the settlement of Metula near the Lebanese border. In general, the Hezbollah positions are mostly located around the mountains here in eastern Lebanon. They have a presence within the hills in southern Lebanon, but their main force is in the mountains. We've seen several videos such as this one, which shows the Hezbollah military capabilities in these mountains. Hezbollah has been active for many decades now, and they've spent that time building underground bunkers within these mountains where they've dug out tunnels and created these sort of bases here underneath the mountains. The objective of these is to create a safe place from where they can launch missiles, they can fight the Israelis, because no matter how much firepower Israel has, a mountain will withstand it. As long as the Israelis do not enter these mountains, Hezbollah will survive, and that is exactly what they are betting on. Hezbollah is reportedly a military with a size of 100,000 soldiers. Although they do not have tanks, airplanes, jets, and so on, they have a lot of ATGM, they have a lot of homemade missiles, they even have cruise missiles from Iran. And that all brings us to the question: if this is what is currently happening, how did Israel prepare and what is the Israeli objective? Starting out with how Israel prepared, they have been starting a massive bombing campaign over Beirut as soon as their ground invasion started. There's a little information about how far they've gone into Lebanon and how many forces they're using, but so far it seems that it is only the initial push from special forces, and the main force is still preparing to enter. This bombing campaign over Beirut has actually been continuing for quite a few days, over a week. They also assassinated the leader of Hezbollah. Not just one leader, but the top Secretary General of Hezbollah, as well as several military commanders. As we see with this image here, this is all of the claimed kills of Hezbollah commanders in general throughout the grouping. So we see that a lot of these commanders have been killed over the past few weeks since the start of the battle between Israel and Hezbollah on October 8th, but generally most of it has happened over the past few weeks. Israel also launched an attack where they blew up a lot of pagers as well as radios of Hezbollah members, both in public and in their bases. This had inflicted over 1,000 casualties on Hezbollah members. All of this was in preparation to this ground invasion. In turn, all Hezbollah has been doing is do some missile strikes against Haifa and the general border area. The interesting thing is, what exactly is the objective of this Israeli ground invasion of southern Lebanon? To answer that, we have to look at what Hezbollah has been doing since October 8th. And in general, that is to pick up positions in the border area, some of these towns and cities in southern Lebanon, the mountain areas, the hills. They have several outposts and positions. From there, they launch missile strikes, they launch ATGM strikes, and so on Israeli positions in northern Israel. This has forced Israelis to evacuate over 60,000 Israeli civilians from their homes in northern Israel. Therefore, we can, based on that, make the inferment that the Israeli objective as a first step, this is why they're calling it a limited incursion, this is why they're not claiming any massive goals, they're not really claiming any goals at all, they're just claiming it is a limited offensive. The objective of this offensive is twofold. The first one is to poke into Lebanese territory and see exactly what sort of resistance Hezbollah will provide with. Will they withdraw to the mountain area and coop up within those mountains to stay safe from Israeli strikes and simply fight from there? Or will they do a front defense where they will prevent the Israelis from even entering Lebanon proper? Will they do ambushes a few kilometers deep into Lebanese territory, where the objective is simply to perform guerrilla warfare on the Israelis, such as the 2006 Israeli-Lebanese War? And that is exactly their first objective, testing out the waters. What will Lebanon do? The second objective would be to create a buffer zone between Israeli and Lebanese territory. The reason for this is if they push the Lebanese away, just a 5 to 10 kilometer buffer zone between Israel and Lebanon will allow the Israelis to return their civilians to northern Israel and allow the Israeli army in northern Israel to be safe from ATGM strikes and most of these short-range weaponry, which are the ones that inflict the most casualties on the Israelis in the north. The long-range missiles, the Israelis have the Iron Dome systems and a lot of more air defense systems that can be used to defend against. But ATGM strikes, it is much more difficult to defend against, and this is the number one casualty concern of the Israelis in northern Lebanon, the ATGM strikes. Therefore, a 5 to 10 kilometer deep buffer zone is exactly what the Israelis want in this initial stage as they test out what the Hezbollah response is. Now, there are multiple scenarios that can come out from this initial push. The first one is if Hezbollah does not fight well, if they simply are disorganized from the destruction of the Hezbollah leadership and are unable to mount a proper resistance against Israeli forces, then Israel will likely upgrade their war goal to launch further operations deeper into Lebanon and to hit the Lebanese Hezbollah infrastructure, military infrastructure near the border areas, and generally destroy their military capabilities in the border areas. The second option is if Hezbollah actually is capable of mounting a successful defense. They set up several ambushes similar to the 2006 Israeli-Lebanese War, and Israel suffers casualties in the hundreds. This would demerit such an operation to go deeper. It would prevent the Israelis from establishing proper offensive operations deeper into Lebanon, and the Israelis will likely hold to this buffer zone, where the objective would simply be to prevent Hezbollah from inflicting heavy casualties on the Israelis. They'll simply create this buffer zone, leave it as a gray area, and have constant surveillance over it, where the main force is within Israeli territory, away from Hezbollah bombings and target systems. So these are the two possibilities. Will the Israelis upgrade or degrade the operation based on the Hezbollah response and capabilities? As for the involvement of other countries, there is no indication that that will happen so far. According to Iran, they have talked and discussed the situation with Hezbollah, and they believe, based on that discussion, that Hezbollah is capable of defending itself and therefore it does not need any Iranian help. Iran has several layers of help they can give. They're currently providing a lot of weaponry to Hezbollah in Lebanon. This is what allows Hezbollah to fight. A second level would be to send volunteers to Lebanon, where they will send soldiers from the Iranian army to fight Israelis within Lebanon. This happened during the 18-year-long Israeli occupation of southern Lebanon from 1982 to year 2000. And the third one would be a direct interference of the Iranian army moving themselves through Iraq and Syria to the Lebanon border area with Israel, where the objective would be to use Iranian jets, Iranian tanks, Iranian soldiers, and their military capabilities to fight the Israeli army. I believe this scenario is very, very unlikely, and I do not really know what could cause such a response. Therefore, I will not really talk that much further about it. In general, what we're seeing is that the Israelis have started their ground invasion of southern Lebanon. Their current commitment to it is very limited. There is a massive force of Israeli soldiers in the border area. Not a lot of them have been committed so far. There is a lot of room for escalation. Therefore, we have to see over the next few days, possibly weeks, to see exactly what happens. What is the result of the limited incursion? How is the Hezbollah response? What will the Israelis do? Will they reach their objectives? So in general, what do we have to measure the success or failure of the Israeli army in southern Lebanon? We have to do that based on two things. First off, the casualties of the Israeli army. The second part is whether they can create this buffer zone to return Israeli civilians to northern Israel. Those are the two measures we can measure it by. Other than that, there is no clear indication as to how successful such an operation would be. And that is going to be all for this video. Thank you all for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and check out my YouTube membership and Patreon for additional content. See you all next time.